On the shores of Lake Erie stands a park that has defined the modern roller coaster. Cedar Point has long been the place where records are broken and boundaries are pushed. In the height of the coaster wars, it was here that the race for speed, height and innovation was fought. From the first coaster to break the 200-foot barrier, to later shattering 300 and eventually soaring past 400, Cedar Point has consistently raised the stakes. Along the way, it redefined what was possible, introducing record-breaking inversions, pushing established ride types to new extremes, and stretching the limits of both steel and wood alike. Milestones that not only transformed the park, but shaped the future of roller coaster design worldwide. These are the record-breaking rides that defined America's roller coast. In the mid-1970s, Cedar Point was in the midst of a transformation. Once a park that had fallen behind in the coaster world, it was now striving to become the Disneyland of the Midwest, bringing bigger, faster and more thrilling rides to Sandusky, Ohio. After a string of new attractions in the 1960s and early 1970s, including Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Wildcat and Blue Streak, the park was ready for its next leap forward. A record-breaking roller coaster that would flip its riders upside down. The ride that would achieve this was Corkscrew, opening on May 15, 1976. Designed by Ron Toomer and built by Aerodynamics, Corkscrew was Cedar Point's first coaster to break world records. It wasn't the first modern inversion or even vertical loop in the world. That honour went to Great American Revolution at Magic Mountain, which opened just a week earlier. But Corkscrew had its own claim to fame, inverting riders 3 times, and uniquely, it sent them upside down over a midway, thrilling onlookers as much as the riders themselves. Cedar Point had initially planned to call the ride the Great Lake Erie Roller, but before opening, the name was simplified to Corkscrew. The ride cost $1.75 million, making it the park's most ambitious investment to date. Its red, white and blue colour scheme celebrated the US bicentennial, giving it a patriotic flair. Corkscrew was built in the centre of the park and opened up a brand new midway. With an 85-foot lift hill, the ride immediately claimed the title of Cedar Point's tallest coaster. The drop that followed sent riders hurtling down 65 feet, at speeds of 48 miles per hour, faster than any coaster the park had previously built. From the moment it opened, Corkscrew captured attention, putting Cedar Point firmly on the map as a serious player in the amusement park world. While Magic Mountain edged it out for the first modern vertical loop, Corkscrew still achieved several legitimate firsts. It was the first roller coaster to invert riders 3 times, and the first roller coaster to go upside down over a midway. Its unique inversions and visible location made Corkscrew an instant landmark. Visitors could watch riders flipping overhead as they made their way across the newly built midway. Corkscrew's experience begins with a slight dip out of the station, followed by a right-hand turn that leads riders into the lift hill. The chain lift climbs 85 feet at a leisurely pace, giving riders a view of the park's growing skyline. From this point, the drop sends them plummeting 65 feet at a 45-degree angle, quickly reaching its 48 miles per hour top speed. Immediately after, riders race into the vertical loop, pulling up and over in a manoeuvre that few had experienced upon opening. The ride then eases into a brief straight section, offering a moment to catch a glimpse of the park, before a turn leads trains into 2 consecutive corkscrews that sends riders upside down over the midway. This layout allowed guests on the ground to see the ride in action, building excitement and anticipation. The entire course lasts just under 2 minutes, but it packs in thrills at every turn, blending speed and inversions into a compact footprint. Originally, Corkscrew operated 3 trains, each carrying 24 passengers. Even with its short duration and high capacity, the coaster's popularity meant long waits, as guests were eager to experience the park's first truly modern coaster. Corkscrew's opening in 1976 marked a turning point for Cedar Point. Attendance soared past 3 million for the first time, and the ride quickly became a must-see attraction. It introduced the thrill of inversions to the Midwest, showing that Cedar Point could compete with the big-name parks on the West Coast. While it was soon surpassed in height and speed by Gemini in 1978, Corkscrew remains a landmark ride and a gateway coaster for a new generation of thrill seekers. Over the decades, the ride has become rougher with age, and newer coasters have taken the spotlight. Still, Corkscrew's influence is undeniable. It was the park's first looping coaster and the ride that began Cedar Point's record-breaking streak. Even today, it stands proud over the Midway, a reminder of a pivotal moment in the history of Cedar Point, where the park went from regional amusement attraction to the self-proclaimed roller coaster capital of the world. In 1978, Cedar Point introduced Gemini, a towering hybrid coaster, part steel, part wood, designed to pit two trains against each other in a race to the finish. While the park claimed it was the tallest, fastest and steepest roller coaster in the world, the reality was more nuanced, but no less impressive. Gemini was still a milestone, marking Cedar Point's ongoing push to add bigger and better thrills. The story of Gemini began in the late 1970s, a period of rapid growth for Cedar Point. The park had been steadily expanding its attractions, from the IMAX Theatre in 1975 to the looping Corkscrew in 1976, each edition bringing larger crowds and higher expectations. By 1977, the park had set its sights on a new record-breaking roller coaster, and Aerodynamics, led by designer Ron Toomer, was tasked with creating it. The concept was ambitious, a racing coaster with a steel track supported by a wooden structure. It would be Arrow's largest hybrid coaster and one of only a handful of racing coasters they ever built. Construction was not without challenges. In June 1977, a tornado swept through the area slated for the ride, uprooting trees and damaging nearby structures. Winter brought further delays, as a blizzard in January 1978 temporarily halted work. Despite these setbacks, Cedar Point pressed on, and Gemini opened on June 17, 1978, as the first attraction on the new Gemini Midway, which connected Frontier Town to the Corkscrew Midway. The ride cost $3.4 million, the most expensive coaster the park had ever built at the time. Cedar Point's marketing for Gemini was bold, claiming it was the tallest, fastest and steepest coaster on the planet. Some of these claims were stretched. The Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg had opened earlier that year, with a comparable height and top speed, and Screaming Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis had already reached 62 miles per hour 2 years prior. But some of Gemini's records were real in its own right. It became the tallest, fastest and longest racing coaster in the world, as well as the tallest, fastest and longest hybrid coaster. For a park building its reputation on thrill rides, Gemini was a landmark achievement. The experience of riding Gemini is defined by its racing layout. Riders choose between red or blue trains, and from the moment the trains leave the station, the race is on. The two trains remain side by side throughout most of the course, occasionally switching places in an unpredictable competition that ensures each ride feels unique. The coaster begins with a sweeping right-hand turn before climbing the 125-foot lift hill. At the top, the trains plummet down a 118-foot drop at 55 degrees, accelerating to 60 miles per hour. Following the drop, the trains navigate a series of elevated hills and wide turns, maintaining close proximity to each other. The layout is designed to keep the trains side by side, enhancing the racing experience. True to the competitive nature, interactions between riders on opposing trains are common. The ride concludes with a final helix and brake run, bringing the train back to the station and crowning the eventual winner. Gemini was not only thrilling, but also efficient. Originally, the coaster operated 6 trains, 3 on each track, but was later reduced to 4, still providing a capacity of over 3,300 riders per hour. Arrow's hybrid design allowed for smoother steel track dynamics atop the wooden structure, a concept that would evolve decades later into modern hybrids. The public's response was immediate. Opening day crowds waited as long as 8 hours to ride Gemini, and people travelled from across the country to experience the coaster. While its claimed world's tallest and fastest titles were dubious, enthusiasts recognised Gemini as a pioneering hybrid and a major step forward in racing coaster design. It became the centrepiece of Cedar Point's coaster lineup, influencing future attractions and cementing the park's reputation for innovation. For decades, it remained a rite of passage for Cedar Point visitors and a staple of the park's identity. Nearly 50 years later, Gemini continues to operate, a testament to both Arrow's design and Cedar Point's commitment to one of its landmark roller coasters. It is often a guest's first introduction to serious coaster thrills, a race that still excites and captivates. By the late 1980s, Cedar Point was a park on the rise. The decade had seen major new attractions almost every year. From Demon Drop in 1983 to Iron Dragon in 1987, and even the opening of Soak City Water Park in 1988. But while the park was growing, it had been over a decade since Cedar Point had introduced a true headline roller coaster, the last being Gemini in 1978. Cedar Point had momentum, but what it lacked was a defining, undisputed world record holder. That opportunity arrived thanks to Dick Kinzel, the newly appointed president and CEO of Cedar Fair. In 1988, Kinzel happened to catch a news segment on a new Japanese roller coaster called Bandit at Yomiuri Land. Bandit emphasised speed and height rather than inversions, a different philosophy from the corkscrews and loops dominating the 1980s. Inspired, Kinzel realised this sort of ride would be perfect for Cedar Point. The company turned to Aerodynamics, the Utah-based manufacturer already behind several of Cedar Point's coasters. Designer Ron Toomer first proposed a 187-foot ride to claim the record for tallest drop. But when Kinzel presented the idea to the Cedar Fair board, one member made a simple suggestion. Why not go even bigger? Pushing just past 200 feet would earn global publicity as the world's first roller coaster to break that barrier. Arrow agreed, and the project was revised. On August 16, 1988, Magnum was officially announced. At an eventual cost of $8 million, it would tower 205 feet above the Cedar Point Peninsula, weaving between the beach, Soak City, and the camper village. Construction began that fall, and by April 1989, the massive steel structure was complete. On May 6th, Magnum XL-200 opened to the public as the tallest, fastest, and steepest complete circuit roller coaster on Earth. At the time of its debut, Magnum shattered 3 major world records. It was the tallest roller coaster in the world, with a 205-foot tall lift hill and a 194-foot first drop. It was the fastest, reaching 72 miles per hour, and it was the steepest, with a 60-degree plunge. It became the first ride to be dubbed a hypercoaster, a term used for roller coasters over 200 feet tall. The ride experience itself was unlike anything else in 1989. Riders boarded 3 trains of 6 cars each, secured by only lap bars and seatbelts. After a short dip and turn, the train latched onto the lift hill chain and slowly climbed skyward. At the summit, views stretched across Lake Erie and the surrounding park, before the train dropped nearly 200 feet in a descent that left riders floating from their seats. From there, Magnum raced into its signature out and back layout. A towering second hill skimmed the lakefront before plunging riders into the first of 3 enclosed tunnels. A twisting pretzel turnaround redirected the train towards the park, setting up a relentless finale of sharp hills and ejector airtime. Many of these hills raced over walkways and past water park structures that took riders by complete surprise. The final dark tunnel capped the experience before the train hit the brakes and rolled back into the station. Magnum was an immediate hit. Despite opening day's cold and rainy weather, the coaster drew crowds from across the country, spiking Cedar Point's attendance to record levels. It quickly topped roller coaster polls, and when Amusement Today launched its Golden Ticket Awards in 1998, Magnum was named the #1 steel coaster in the world 3 years in a row. Even today, more than 3 decades later, it remains a top 50 steel coaster worldwide. But perhaps Magnum's greatest legacy is what it set in motion. Its success kicked off the so-called roller coaster wars, a multi-year race between parks to build taller, faster and more extreme coasters. Magnum's records fell in the 1990s, first to Steel Phantom at Kennywood for drop and speed, and later to the big one at Blackpool for height. But Cedar Point itself would keep pushing higher in the decades that followed. Millions of people from around the world have ridden Magnum XL-200 since it opened, and it continues to operate as a fan favourite, being designated an ace roller coaster landmark. It was the ride that cemented Cedar Point's identity as the roller coaster capital of the world, and while it no longer holds its records, Magnum XL-200 will always be remembered as the coaster that changed everything. By the early 1990s, Cedar Point was defining itself through ever more extreme roller coasters and thrill rides. Magnum XL-200 had just launched the park into the global spotlight as the world's first hypercoaster. But Cedar Point wasn't content to dominate the steel coaster wars. They wanted a wooden giant to match. That roller coaster would be Mean Streak. Construction began in 1990, and the project was unlike anything the park had attempted before. Rising out of Frontier Town, the massive structure consumed over 1.7 million board feet of southern yellow pine, towering over the end of the peninsula. The project was built by the Din Corporation, with Curtis D. Summers handling design. Din had just completed Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas, a ride that showed the potential of colossal wooden coasters. Cedar Point wanted to go one better, taller, faster, longer. On May 11, 1991, Mean Streak, the world's tallest and fastest wooden roller coaster, officially opened. At a cost of $7.5 million, it showed Cedar Point's commitment to constructing world-class roller coasters, a trend that would only continue. At the time of its debut, Mean Streak broke several records for wooden coasters. Its 161-foot lift hill made it the tallest wooden coaster in existence. Its 155-foot first drop was the longest ever constructed in wood, and with a top speed of 65 miles per hour, it was the fastest wooden roller coaster in the world. At 5,427 feet of track, it was also one of the longest wooden coasters anywhere, lasting over 3 minutes from start to finish. For a brief moment in 1991, Mean Streak represented the pinnacle of wooden coaster engineering. However, records in the coaster world rarely last long. Just 1 year later, in 1992, Fiesta Texas debuted the Rattler, a ride that surpassed Mean Streak in both height and drop. But for its opening season, Cedar Point could proudly claim that it held the crown in both steel and wood, with Magnum and Mean Streak holding their respective titles. As guests approached Mean Streak, it was unmistakable, a sprawling lattice of timber dominating the northern end of the park, visible from Lake Erie and towering over Frontier Town. Guests entering the queue were greeted with the sheer scale of the structure, its network of supports rising above them. The ride began with a right-hand dip out of the station, lining up with the imposing lift hill. The climb itself was slow, giving riders time to look out over the lake to one side and the growing collection of coasters behind them on the other. At the top, riders crested at 161 feet, before plunging down the 155-foot first drop. Early riders described the sensation as unlike anything a wooden coaster had delivered before, an enormous descent that rivaled many steel rides of the day. From there, Mean Streak carried riders over a mix of large hills and banked curves, diving repeatedly into its own wooden structure. The layout crossed over itself several times, threading through the dense lattice of supports in dramatic fashion. A mid-course break section offered a brief pause, before diving into another series of smaller hills as the massive structure loomed overhead. The trains, built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, carried 28 riders each, with distinctive red, green and gold paint schemes. When the coaster was new, the ride was smoother than many expected from wood, with long lines often stretching several hours during its debut season. In its first years, Mean Streak was a hit. Cedar Point marketed it heavily, boasting not only its records, but also its sheer scale. For many guests in the early 1990s, it became a must-ride attraction, standing as the park's wooden counterpart to Magnum XL-200. But as time passed, Mean Streak's shine would fade. Wooden coasters, especially those built on this scale, often struggle with maintenance, and Mean Streak was no exception. Within a few years, trim brakes were added to the first drop to control its speed, dampening some of the intensity. The ride also became increasingly rough. Despite frequent retracking and a dedicated on-site carpentry team, Mean Streak developed a reputation among enthusiasts and the public as uncomfortable. Still, the coaster left an impression. Its size alone was awe-inspiring, and for visitors in the 1990s, it helped cement Cedar Point as the park of record-breaking rides. Even as its popularity declined, Mean Streak remained a landmark on the park's skyline for over 25 years. By the mid-2010s, however, ridership had dwindled. On August 1, 2016, Cedar Point announced that Mean Streak would be getting the axe. Its final rides were given on September 16th. While its successor, Steel Vengeance, would go on to define what wood and steel hybrids could do, Mean Streak itself holds an important place in history. For a time, it was the tallest and fastest wooden coaster in the world. It was a ride that pushed the limits of wooden engineering, and even if it didn't age gracefully, it represented Cedar Point's relentless drive to lead the amusement industry. As the 1990s got underway, Cedar Point was in the midst of a transformation. The roller coaster wars were well underway, and the park was gaining a reputation as the place where thrill rides were taken to the extreme. In 1991, they had opened Mean Streak, then the tallest wooden coaster in the world. While in 1993, Snake River Falls claimed records as the tallest and fastest water ride anywhere. Each season brought something new, but the park's leadership knew they needed a fresh kind of roller coaster to redefine the main midway. That would come in 1994 with Raptor, Cedar Point's 11th coaster. The new ride replaced Mill Race, one of the park's log flumes, which had been operating since 1963. Removing it wasn't easy. Guests had nostalgic ties to the boat ride, but Cedar Point saw an opportunity to completely reshape the front of the park. Along with Mill Race, the Midway Carousel and Calypso were relocated, and much of the Midway itself was torn up and rebuilt, giving Cedar Point a blank canvas for something massive. The inspiration came from Six Flags Great America. In 1992, that park had unveiled Batman the Ride, the world's first inverted roller coaster from the Swiss firm Bolliger & Mabillard. Unlike traditional coasters, where trains ride on top of the track, inverted coasters hang beneath it, with the track overhead and riders' feet dangling freely below. Batman was an instant hit, compact in layout, but intense in pacing, flipping riders upside down 5 times in a tight footprint. Cedar Point's executives rode it and were immediately sold. They wanted one for themselves, but bigger, faster, and more ambitious. On September 1st, 1993, Cedar Point announced Raptor. It will be the tallest, fastest, and longest inverted coaster in the world, standing 137 feet tall, with a 119-foot drop, a top speed of 57 miles per hour, and 6 inversions. Even more impressive, it would introduce the first Cobra roll on an inverted coaster, a twisting element that flipped riders upside down twice in rapid succession. Construction began as soon as the 1993 season ended. Crews poured 119 concrete footers, laid down £1.5 million of steel, and even rebuilt 85,000 square feet of midway to accommodate the new giant. The lift hill was topped off in December, and by March, trains were already being tested. On May 7, 1994, Raptor officially opened to the public, dominating the park's entrance with its sprawling green track and birds of prey theme. The ride experience begins with the unique B&M inverted trains. Each row seats 4 people across, with over-the-shoulder restraints, leaving riders' feet hanging in the open air. As the floor of the station drops away, the train makes a left-hand turn and begins the climb up the 137-foot lift hill. Facing Lake Erie, riders are given a brief moment to take in the view before cresting the top. The train dips slightly and then plunges 119 feet toward the midway below, reaching 57 miles per hour. Immediately, the track sweeps into a towering vertical loop. From there, riders are thrown into a zero-gravity roll, twisting weightlessly through the sky. Next comes Raptor's signature element, the Cobra roll. In a matter of seconds, the train pulls up into a half loop, twisting through a corkscrew, then mirrors the manoeuvre in reverse. From there, the train banks into a forceful upward helix, rising into the mid-course brake run, which slows the train briefly before the second act begins. A sharp drop to the right plunges riders back toward the midway, setting up for 2 consecutive corkscrews. These whip the trains around, disorienting riders as the ground rushes past beneath their feet. Finally, Raptor barrels into a massive helix, circling 1.5 times with crushing positive G-forces before gliding into the final brakes. From start to finish, the ride lasts just over 2 minutes, but it delivers a relentless sequence of speed, inversions and intensity that instantly cemented it as one of Cedar Point's signature attractions. At the time of its debut, Raptor shattered records. It was the world's tallest, fastest and longest inverted coaster, with the most inversions ever on the model. It was the first to feature a Cobra roll, and it became one of the most ambitious projects ever attempted by B&M up to that point. Cedar Point advertised it as the park's new icon, and the public responded. In 1994, the park drew over 3.6 million visitors, a record attendance that still stands as one of the highest in its history. Over the years, Raptor has been repainted and looked after, kept in top condition and continuing to thrill new generations of riders. While other landmark coasters have since arrived at Cedar Point, Raptor remains one of the most popular rides in the park, a true classic from the era when inverted coasters were redefining what roller coasters could be. For Cedar Point, Raptor was more than just another addition. It transformed the front of the park, introduced a bold new ride style to millions of guests, and once again proved that Cedar Point was willing to go bigger than anyone else. As the year 2000 approached, Cedar Point had already cemented itself as the roller coaster capital of the world. Magnum XL-200 had kicked off the coaster wars a decade earlier, ushering in the age of hypercoasters. Raptor had set records for inverted coasters, and Mean Streak had pushed the limits of wooden giants. The park was increasingly defined by its coasters that shaped its skyline, and behind the scenes, Cedar Point was already planning something that would push coaster designs even further. That push would eventually become Millennium Force. The idea began as early as 1996. Cedar Point wanted a statement coaster for the new millennium, something taller, faster, and unlike anything the world had ever seen. Rumours swirled through the late 90s. Would it be a massive stand-up from B&M? A record-breaking looping machine from Arrow? In truth, Cedar Point was in talks with Intamin, a Swiss manufacturer that had quietly been working with legendary designer Werner Stengel on a new concept. On July 22, 1999, the park made the announcement. Millennium Force would be the world's first giga coaster, a new category of rides standing over 300 feet tall. It would climb 310 feet, dropping 300 feet, and reach speeds of 93 miles per hour. With 6,595 feet of track, it would also be one of the longest coasters ever built. The project carried a $25 million price tag and promised to shatter 5 world records. Construction began that same summer. The location chosen was on the edge of the park, stretching out towards Sandusky Bay. To make room, the giant wheel was relocated. Parts of Frontier Trail were reworked, and even the Cedar Point and Lake Erie Railroad was shifted. More than 200 footers were poured, some as large as 56 by 56 feet. By December 1999, the 310-foot tall lift hill was topped off. Crews spent the winter connecting more than 200 sections of blue steel track, each weighing up to 1,700 pounds. One of Millennium Force's defining innovations was its lift system. Instead of a traditional chain, Intamin introduced a cable lift. This technology allowed trains to be pulled up the hill in just 30 seconds. It was the first time such a system had ever been used on a roller coaster. When Millennium Force opened on May 13, 2000, it was a sensation. Riders waited as long as 8 hours to board during opening weekend. The media descended on Sandusky, dubbing it the ride of the new millennium. Some enthusiasts even argued it had ended the coaster wars by achieving what many thought impossible: a full-circuit roller coaster over 300 feet tall. The ride itself was, and still is, a masterpiece of pacing and design. Riders board one of 3 trains, painted red, yellow or blue, and are secured with simple T-shaped lap bars. As it creeps forward, the train latches onto the cable lift and begins its rapid climb. To the left, Sandusky Bay. To the right, the sprawling park comes into view. Cresting 310 feet, the train gives riders just a second to take in the panorama before plunging down a 300-foot drop at 80 degrees. At the bottom, the train hits 93 miles per hour, the fastest speed ever achieved by a full-circuit coaster at the time. From there, Millennium Force doesn't let up. It soars into a 169-foot overbanked turn, tilted at 122 degrees, creating the illusion of being nearly upside down. The track dives through a dark tunnel, then rockets over a 182-foot airtime hill that carries riders towards the centre of the park. The layout continues with a sweeping 360-degree helix, a second overbank curve, and a smaller hill with sharp airtime. The train plunges into another tunnel before racing past the queue line, skimming low to the ground. A final overbank turn sends the train hurtling into the brake run, where magnetic fins bring the train to a smooth stop. From start to finish, the ride lasts just over 2 minutes, but it feels like an epic journey. Flying past shoreline, across lagoons and islands, and through tunnels at unrelenting speed. At its debut, Millennium Force set 5 world records: the tallest complete circuit roller coaster, the longest drop, the fastest full-circuit coaster, the first ever to break the 300-foot barrier, and the steepest non-inverting turn. The coaster was an instant hit with critics and fans. It topped Amusement Today's Golden Ticket Awards as the world's best steel coaster 10 times, and has remained in the top 5 every year since its debut. It became the benchmark against which all modern thrill rides were measured, and many designers and enthusiasts credit Millennium Force with ushering in the modern era of mega coasters. Although later rides would surpass it in height and speed, Millennium Force retains its place as one of the most iconic roller coasters in the world. For many, it is the perfect combination of scale, speed, and smoothness, a ride that delivers thrills without sacrificing comfort. More than 2 decades after its debut, Millennium Force still dominates Cedar Point's skyline, its cable lift pulling train after train into the sky, before plunging them back down to Earth at nearly 100 miles per hour. For Cedar Point, it wasn't just another record breaker, it was the ride that defined a new millennium. By the early 2000s, Cedar Point had become known for pushing roller coaster limits. Millennium Force had stunned the world as the first coaster over 300 feet tall. But even before it opened, park executives were already asking themselves a bigger question: what could possibly come next? According to Rob Decker, the park's vice president of planning and design, the challenge to manufacture Intamin was simple: build the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world. Planning began in 2001, designing a ride unlike anything seen before. While other coasters reached for height with traditional lift hills, this new project would use a hydraulic launch system, essentially a massive winch cable powered by hydraulic fluid, to hurl riders down a drag strip and up a vertical tower. The concept would become iconic, a ride featuring a single 420-foot top hat element, with trains launched at 120 miles per hour in under 4 seconds. It would be the first ever strata coaster, a new classification for rides over 400 feet. Construction began in 2002. Massive foundations were poured, and by autumn, the skeleton of the tower began to rise. At 420 feet, it required cranes nearly 500 feet tall, and at the time, only 4 such cranes existed in the United States. On January 9, 2003, Cedar Point officially announced the ride's name, Top Thrill Dragster. Themed after Top Fuel drag racing, the launch area was styled like a drag strip, complete with starting light. The tagline was simple, "Race for the Sky." Top Thrill Dragster opened to the public on May 4, 2003. At the time, no other ride compared. It stood taller than Superman the Escape at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and it was faster than Dodonpa in Japan. Its 420-foot tower and 120-mile-per-hour launch were world records, and its 400-foot drop was the longest on any coaster. The ride experience was short but unforgettable. After leaving the station, trains rolled into the launch track. A voice warned, "Keep arms down, head back and hold on." Then, with the lights counting down, the train rocketed forward, hitting 120 miles per hour in just 3.8 seconds. Riders shot straight up the 420-foot top hat, twisted over the crest, and spiraled down 270 degrees during the drop, before slamming into the brake run. The entire ride lasted less than 20 seconds, but those seconds were some of the most intense in the world. Dragster immediately became a symbol of Cedar Point. Its sleek red and yellow tower dominated the skyline, visible for miles along Lake Erie. But it also developed a reputation for unreliability. The hydraulic launch system was temperamental, with frequent breakdowns and downtime, especially in the early years. Rain, wind, or even temperature shifts could cause delays or the famous rollbacks, where trains failed to clear the tower and roll back down the launch track. Despite the issues, Top Thrill Dragster quickly became one of the most iconic coasters in the world. It regularly ranks among the top steel coasters in enthusiast polls and drew huge crowds each season. However, its reign at the top was short. In 2005, just 2 years after it opened, Six Flags Great Adventure debuted King Dakar, another Intamin-built ride that stood taller at 456 feet and faster at 128 miles per hour. Dragster had lost its world records, but still held an appeal that kept riders lining up year after year. For nearly 2 decades, Top Thrill Dragster thrilled millions. But on August 15, 2021, tragedy struck. A small metal object detached from a train and struck a guest waiting in line. The ride was immediately shut down. Cedar Point faced intense scrutiny and launched a full investigation alongside Ohio regulators. After over a year closed, the park confirmed in September 2022 that Top Thrill Dragster as you know it has been retired. For a time, many believed the ride would be torn down entirely. However, in August 2023, Cedar Point revealed that Dragster would be reborn. Re-engineered by Italian manufacturer Zamperla into a brand new experience, Top Thrill 2. The core of the original ride remained, the iconic 420-foot top hat tower, but across from it, a brand new vertical spike was added, making it the first roller coaster in the world with 2 structures over 400 feet. The unreliable hydraulic system was replaced with modern linear synchronous motors, which accelerated trains in 3 stages. A forward launch, a reverse launch up the spike, and a final push to 120 miles per hour cresting the top hat. The track length grew and the ride was repainted. The drag racing theme was retired in favour of a sleek CP racing motif, giving the ride a modern identity while honouring its past. As Top Thrill Dragster, the ride was pure intensity. 1 launch, 1 tower, 1 drop. Short but unforgettable. As Top Thrill 2, the experience stretches into nearly a full minute of action. The first launch propels trains partway up the top hat, before stalling and rolling backwards. The second launch hurls them in reverse, at over 100 miles per hour, climbing the vertical spike and giving riders a view of the park while facing straight down. Finally, the third launch fires trains forward at 120 miles per hour, this time with enough power to clear the top hat before spiralling down its massive drop. The sequence not only solves the reliability issues, but also transforms the ride into something far more dynamic than its predecessor. Top Thrill 2 officially opened on May 4th, 2024, to enormous anticipation. However, the season was cut short after only a week, when issues with Zamperla's new trains forced the ride to close for modifications. It returned in 2025, more reliable and ready for a full season of operation. With the closure of King Dakar at Six Flags Great Adventure in late 2024, Top Thrill 2 once again became the tallest operating roller coaster in the world, more than 2 decades after Dragster first held that crown. It also claimed new distinctions, the world's tallest and fastest triple launch coaster, as well as featuring the fastest backward launch. Few rides in history have had such dramatic arcs of rise, fall and rebirth. From its 2003 debut as the first strata coaster to its re-emergence as Top Thrill 2 in 2024, the ride represents Cedar Point's relentless drive to innovate, even when faced with setbacks. Top Thrill Dragster was a marvel of its era, a record breaker that symbolised Cedar Point's dominance in the coaster wars of the early 2000s. Top Thrill 2 is something different, a reinvention that acknowledges the past while embracing the future, ensuring the skyline over Lake Erie will remain defined by its 420-foot tower for years to come. In 2012, Cedar Point was looking for its next major investment. The park had spent the previous decade building some of the tallest, fastest and most extreme rides on the planet, but it had been 5 years since a new roller coaster had opened. The time had come for something fresh, an attraction that could both deliver thrills and make a bold visual statement. The result was GateKeeper, a $30 million project that not only set multiple world records, but also redefined the park's entrance. GateKeeper would be a wing coaster, a relatively new concept designed by the Swiss manufacturer Bolliger & Mabillard. Instead of sitting above or below the track, riders were suspended on either side, their feet dangling in open air with nothing above or below them. When Cedar Point announced it, the park promised the biggest, boldest example of this new ride type. To make room for the project, the park made some difficult choices. The quirky enclosed bobsled ride Disaster Transport closed in July of 2012, followed just weeks later by the removal of Space Spiral, an observation tower that had been part of the skyline since 1965. The demolition of these 2 rides opened up prime real estate near the park's entrance, and in their place, Cedar Point would not only add GateKeeper itself, but create a completely reworked front entrance plaza. GateKeeper opened as the tallest of its kind, standing 170 feet high. Its first drop plunged 164 feet toward the ground, making it both the steepest and fastest wing coaster ever created, reaching speeds of 67 miles per hour. At 4,164 feet, it also claimed the record for length. In total, the ride turned guests upside down 6 times, including the highest inversion on any roller coaster in the world at the time. But the most iconic feature wasn't the statistics. It was the way GateKeeper integrated into Cedar Point's entry experience. The track soared directly over the brand new front gate, threading through 2 100-foot tall keyhole towers that flanked the turnstiles. To arriving guests, the sight was breathtaking. Trains flying through impossibly narrow gaps, riders' legs dangling just feet away from the steel supports. The construction itself was a major undertaking. Beginning in September of 2012, crews poured nearly 200 footers, each about 6 feet deep, and erected over 100 track pieces. Space Spiral's removal was particularly dramatic, with the entire 330-foot tower brought down in a controlled demolition that toppled it onto the beach. By February 2013, the final track segment was in place, and GateKeeper was ready for testing. When the ride finally opened on May 11th, the response was overwhelming. The park recorded its most successful opening weekend in history, with GateKeeper as the centrepiece. Riders praised its smoothness, its near-miss elements, and the sheer spectacle of watching it fly over the entrance. By the end of the season, over 2.1 million people had ridden it, more than any other ride at Cedar Point that year. The experience itself was equally impressive. Trains left the station and climbed the 170-foot lift hill, overlooking Lake Erie. At the crest, riders were flipped upside down into its signature wing-over drop, a twisting inversion that rolled them before plunging toward the ground at full speed. From there, the layout launched into an Immelman loop, a camelback hill with a burst of airtime, and a massive corkscrew inversion. But the moment everyone remembered came at the front gate, the zero-G roll threading through the two keyhole towers, a perfect near-miss illusion that felt impossibly narrow. The finale featured a dive loop, inline twist, and a final helix before returning to the station. 6 inversions in all, delivered with B&M's trademark smoothness. GateKeeper's impact went far beyond its ride experience. It revitalised the park entrance, creating a brand new front gate that greeted every visitor with the sight and sound of a world-class roller coaster. It also continued Cedar Point's tradition of debuting record-breaking attractions, ensuring that even in an era where competitors around the world were pushing boundaries, the park remained at the centre of the conversation. Though newer coasters have since claimed many of its records, GateKeeper's legacy lives on, welcoming millions of guests to their day at Cedar Point. By the mid-2010s, Cedar Point had spent decades pushing roller coaster records, from Magnum XL-200 to Millennium Force and top Thrill Dragster. But after GateKeeper opened in 2013, the park looked for another way to diversify its lineup. Rather than chasing sheer height and speed, they turned to a model not yet seen at the Cedar Fair chain, the dive coaster. Built by B&M, Valravn would become the tallest, fastest and longest of its kind anywhere in the world, and added another record-breaking chapter to Cedar Point's history. Rumours of a massive new coaster began in late 2014, when Cedar Point started clearing a large section of land near the Marina Gate entrance. The demolition of the Good Time Theatre and the removal of rides like the Turnpike Cars, Calypso and Dodgems left fans speculating about something big. In early 2015, a memo from B&M leaked, hinting at a record-breaking dive coaster for the park's 2016 season. Interest only grew when Cedar Point trademarked the name Valravn. In Danish folklore, the Valravn was a supernatural raven that fed from the bodies of the fallen, a dark image that promised something dramatic. In September 2015, the park officially confirmed the project. It would be B&M's 100th coaster overall and Cedar Point's 18th operating roller coaster. Construction moved quickly. By October 2015, supports and track were going vertical. The towering lift hill soon climbed to its full 223 feet, dominating the park's front midway. By March 2016, the last piece of track was installed, and test runs began shortly after. On May 7th, Valravn officially opened to the public. Upon opening, Valravn shattered records for the dive coaster model. It stood 223 feet tall, with a 214-foot vertical drop, reached speeds of 75 miles per hour, and stretched 3,415 feet in length. It featured 3 inversions, more than any dive coaster before it, including the tallest inversion of its kind, at 165 feet. The addition also boosted Cedar Point's overall statistics. With Valravn, the park claimed more coasters over 200 feet than any other park, more rides overall, and more coaster track than anywhere else in the world. Valravn begins with a left-hand turn out of the station, before climbing the 223-foot lift hill. At the top, the train makes a slow turn to face Lake Erie. Riders are then dangled over the edge of the drop, held in place for several suspenseful seconds. With legs free and nothing but open air in front of them, the anticipation builds until the train suddenly releases, plunging down 214 feet at a perfect vertical angle. From there, the coaster rises into a towering 165-foot Immelman inversion, flipping riders head over heels before levelling out into a sweeping curve. The train then climbs into the mid-course brake run, with a brief pause before a second plunge at 131 feet. This leads directly into a dive loop, twisting the train into another inversion before rolling through a zero-G roll. The final moments include a swift airtime hill and a banked turn before hitting the brake run. With its vest-style restraints, including for the first time on a dive coaster, the experience felt smooth and open, giving riders clear views of the park and Lake Erie throughout the ride. Valravn was met with strong demand from the start, often drawing lines of 2 hours or more during its debut season. It won Best New Ride of 2016 at the Golden Ticket Awards and quickly became a must-ride for visitors. Fans appreciated its smoothness, commanding views and dramatic first drop, though some critics noted its wide train's limited intensity. Still, its impact was clear, with its signature vertical drop redefining the skyline and giving new life to that section of the Midway. Today, Valravn remains the tallest dive coaster in the world, a title it shares with Yukon Striker at Canada's Wonderland. It also holds a special place as B&M's 100th roller coaster, a milestone for one of the industry's most important manufacturers. For Cedar Point, it marked the continuation of a long tradition, building coasters that break records and make statements. While not as extreme as top Thrill Dragster or as groundbreaking as Magnum XL-200, Valravn brought a fresh ride style to the park, and in typical Cedar Point fashion, it wouldn't be long before the park was preparing for yet another record-breaking edition. Mean Streak had long come to its end. After 25 years, the massive wooden coaster closed, its reputation long diminished. Cedar Point stated only that it was getting the axe, but fans immediately began to speculate. The ride's huge support structure was left standing, and before long, pieces of steel track were spotted on site. Something big was happening in Frontier Town. The rumours proved true. Cedar Point had partnered with Rocky Mountain Construction, a company that had made its name transforming aging wooden coasters into modern steel hybrids. Their signature innovation was the iBox track, a steel running rail mounted on top of wooden structures. The result combined the look and feel of a wooden coaster with the smoothness and intensity of a steel design. On August 16, 2017, Cedar Point officially announced the project. The old Mean Streak would be reborn as Steel Vengeance, the world's first hyper-hybrid coaster, reaching over 200 feet in height. The transformation was an immense undertaking. Over 18 months of construction, much of Mean Streak's original wooden frame was retained, but the entire track was replaced and redesigned by RMC's Alan Schilke. The ride's lift hill grew from 161 feet to 205 feet, its drop deepened, and the layout was extended. What had been an often sluggish wooden coaster was reborn as a relentless record breaker. When Steel Vengeance opened to the public on May 5, 2018, it instantly claimed its place in the record books. At 205 feet, it was the tallest hybrid coaster in the world. Its first drop plunged a full 200 feet, at a perfect 90 degrees, the steepest ever attempted on a wooden steel hybrid. Riders reached speeds of 74 miles per hour, making it the fastest of its kind. And with 5,740 feet of track, it was also the longest. But the numbers didn't stop there. Steel Vengeance flipped riders upside down 4 times, more inversions than any other hybrid coaster. And perhaps most impressive of all, it delivered 27.2 seconds of airtime, more than any other roller coaster ever created. Cedar Point billed it as the world's first hyper-hybrid, and it set a new standard for what was possible in a wooden steel hybrid design. The ride experience of Steel Vengeance is nothing short of relentless. It begins with a right-hand turn out of the station, followed by 2 small bunny hops that give riders an early taste of airtime. From there, the train climbs the towering 205-foot lift hill, offering views of Lake Erie and Cedar Point's skyline. At the crest, the track plunges straight down a 200-foot vertical drop, hitting 74 miles per hour in an instant. The layout combines speed, airtime and inversions in rapid succession. The train races over a series of airtime hills, including outward banked elements that throw riders in unexpected directions. It dives through the structure into its first inversion, a 0G roll, before twisting into a wave turn and then encountering a 0G stall. The mid-course brake run offers a moment's pause before the second half begins. The train dives again, careening through more overbanked turns and 2 more 0G rolls, each sending riders head over heels while threading through the dense wooden lattice. The finale is a breathtaking series of 6 rapid-fire airtime hills, tossing riders skyward again and again until the final brakes hit. At 2.5 minutes long, the ride manages to combine intensity with length, offering more sustained airtime than any coaster in the world. By the end of 2018, Steel Vengeance had already been awarded Best New Ride by Amusement Today's Golden Ticket Awards, and it has remained near the top of coaster rankings ever since. For enthusiasts, Steel Vengeance was more than just another record breaker. It was a game changer. The ride took every element Mean Street lacked, airtime, smoothness, unpredictability, and amplified them to world-class levels. With 27 seconds of airtime and a perfect mix of elements, it quickly developed a reputation as one of the greatest coasters ever built. In the years since, it has constantly ranked among the top steel coasters in the world, often alongside Fury 325 at Carowinds and Cedar Point's own Millennium Force. Fans and critics alike have hailed it as a masterpiece, with some calling it the best roller coaster on the planet. Steel Vengeance represents more than just the transformation of an old ride. It marks the evolution of Cedar Point itself. Where Mean Street once stood as a fading monument to wooden coaster ambition, Steel Vengeance became a symbol of reinvention. Proof that even a declining ride could be reborn into something extraordinary. It is a ride that combines size, speed and innovation with the artistry of RMC's design, and it continues Cedar Point's tradition of pushing roller coasters into uncharted territory. For many, it is the crown jewel of the park's collection, a modern classic. Even in a park filled with record breakers, Steel Vengeance set a new benchmark, a ride that turned the ghost of Mean Street into one of the greatest coasters ever built. From the first coaster to shatter 200 feet, to the hybrids and hypercoasters that redefined what wood and steel could do, Cedar Point's record-breaking rides have left an undeniable mark on the park and the world of roller coasters. Each milestone pushed the limits, thrilled a generation of guests, and inspired designers across the globe. Even as new attractions rise and the skyline changes, the impact of these rides remain. They are more than just records or statistics. They are the moments that made Cedar Point what it is today. A place where the future of roller coasters is always just over the next lift hill.